you look at the earlier days, the support for going abroad are centered around the larger enterprises because then you can bring your brand abroad. The trade wars or the trade tensions in the last 8 years has really reconfigured a lot of trade structures and business structures. I don't think that we can anymore look at our home market as a base for us to build our strength. What does that mean for SMEs when you have all these companies landing here? It means that competition now becomes very intense.
Today we have a very special guest as well. To describe him, right, I will use 4 words: a leader, a builder, a husband, and a father.
Hi, I'm Yuit, and I'm on a mission to transform the economy of SMEs in Singapore.
What is so important about the work that you're doing in Asme?
By pooling SMEs together, Asme would then drive that out together, try to find partners in other countries, maybe even partner larger Singaporean firms over there by bringing together SMEs and say, hey guys, do you want to work together with these 10 companies who have come together? Likely, we can go and pitch for larger projects. I want to say that joining Asme is an imperative.
I mean, just join Asme, it's free, guys. It's free.
I think it's really important that we look at coming together and work for a Singapore flag in terms of going out and hunt as a pack.
Welcome to the Man on a Mission podcast, where we interview visionary leaders, founders who are passionate about serving their people. Today is a very special episode because we have hit our episode 10. Yay! And because of that, we're going to elevate it by inviting a new co-host on board, who is my business partner as well, Adeline.
Thank you for having me.
Ooh. Fun fact, Adeline is actually a magician of 15 years.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Later you can perform a magic trick.
Okay, today we have a very special guest as well, a personal friend of mine and a partner that I'm working with in Asme, Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. And to describe him, right, I will use 4 words: a leader, a builder,
Yes.
a husband, and a father.
Champion of Singapore.
Our role model in many areas. Okay, let's welcome Ang Yuit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to give a short introduction of yourself?
I think in summary, that's what I do. One part is leading people. I personally think that leadership is a very important quality and something that I have spent a lot of time and continue to look at how I can be a better leader. And I think through leadership, then things can be accomplished. People can come together for shared purpose. Then builder, right?
Yes.
I've got a passion in building things. I used to be an engineer. I graduated from engineering in NUS. So building stuff is kind of like my passion. But I guess I prefer to be even better a builder. I build a lot more on the software side. But I always think that I would like to dabble into the hardware side of things. Just a matter of time, right? But generally, yes, building stuff. We building companies, even building people. So it's kind of related to one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Then father lah, naturally, 5 kids coming in early March, 6.
Yes.
And then, of
very
course,
abundant.
Yes, yes, quite like a blink of an eye, and then you are like so many kids.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being the husband of my wife, the hard work actually done by the woman and my wife, and I think whatever I do is really important that it's supported and it is partnered by my wife. So I think it's a very important piece. So that coming at the last is the foundation.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
That's great advice. Yeah.
It's important, right? Partnership is always important.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And today we want to introduce Yuit, right, and interview him in our podcast because he is the president of Asme, which is amazing and great work at what we do at Asme, right? So I think Adeline has a perspective of SMEs in Singapore that you want to share.
Yes, exactly. Because I think a lot of people, business owners or not alike, right, have a different idea or understanding of the economy, right? A lot of people don't actually realize that SMEs contribute a lot to the economy. So perhaps in GDP, yes, it's about half of what we say the GDP-wise, half compared to the MNCs. But in terms of our local workforce, right, we are really talking about 2/3. You mentioned, right, 60 to 70% of our local workforce being employed by SMEs. And what people don't realize is that for MNCs and all that, a lot of times when things happen or economy goes bad or goes soft, they very easily withdraw from the local side of things, right? From Singapore, for example, and we hear a lot of layoffs and stuff like that. But then SMEs, on the other hand, are literally the pillars that doesn't just go away because they are rooted in Singapore. So that being said, that means that SMC really contributes a lot to the economy. And therefore, it is a very, very important thing that we are supporting the SMEs.
Yeah. Maybe to explain a bit more about SMEs in a technical sense, right? For the audience who are new to this term, what is the criteria to be an SME in Singapore?
Yeah. So the definition of SME is defined by Ministry of Trade and Industry. And it is defined as any company that is less than 100 million in turnover or less than 200 people in size.
I see.
So you got to be exceeding both for you to not be an SME. So it's a very, very broad definition.
Yeah.
But if you look at this definition, actually, majority of our SMEs are much smaller. So they're in the small and micro, right?
Yeah.
You go to any neighborhood center, you go to HDB hub and so on, you see a lot of provision shops, you see food store seller, you see hardware stores.
Yeah.
All these are very likely an SME. And sometimes they're one-man show, they can be two-man show. And that constitutes the micro side.
Yes.
Our government doesn't really have, don't really mention micro, but SME includes the micro, right? Which are really, really small. I think less than 5 person, you're kind of like in the micro space.
Yeah.
Right.
In other countries, micro and small is kind of clearly said, but in Singapore, we just call it SME. And I wanted to share a bit about the whole broad picture, right?
Yeah.
So we have SMEs, and then you have the larger local enterprises, and then you have the multinationals. I think the challenge of running a country from an economic perspective is really how do you balance or how do you ensure that there's a healthy mix of this kind of different enterprises? I think importantly, if you look, right, not just about employment, but you look at the people.
Yes.
A lot of the high flyers or the really high performers will find it a bit challenging to work in an SME because maybe the pace is a bit slower and maybe they feel that the headroom is not quite there.
You mean SMEs' pace are slower than MNCs?
Yes, in certain way, in terms of what they perceive as career growth
Oh,
opportunity.
okay,
So the
that makes sense.
headroom in that
Yes.
sense.
Because I would think a startup is very busy all the time,
That's right.
working more than 8 hours.
Correct.
But MNC is a lot more structured, 9 to
Yes.
6. And they have SOPs clearly laid out. One person just do one thing.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So many of them may find that the MNC environment gives them the opportunity to climb the ladder, right?
Yes.
Because they go in and see the MNC, they say, oh, that's the CEO. Maybe in 50 years I can be that, or whatever number of years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more structured and they can see how to climb.
Yes.
In an SME, I would say that the startup is also an SME in that sense, but typically they follow a very different structure and growth path, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So they're more like a unique creature in itself, but by definition, yes, likely they're an SME. So in a large enterprise, many of the people who want to work in MNC or in a large enterprise would typically just go for it when they graduate,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But then there are others who maybe don't make the cut or they prefer a different pace. And then that's where the SME come in, right? So the value of the SME market and so on, it actually constitutes and allows for that cushion to kind of build the economy up on so that your MNC sits in a certain layer and is actually supported by the whole SME market, right?
Yeah.
And even people.
Which makes up 2/3 of the total employment.
Exactly. So then if some of the older people working in the MNC or they find that the pace cannot, they have the option to go to an SME, right?
Yeah.
So it's vice versa. And then of course you have cases where SME people working there, they go to a larger enterprise or
Yeah.
MNC,
Yeah.
right? So a healthy mix would allow for that to happen. So we all play different roles and we all contribute in our own way to a vibrant economy. And that makes it an important thing to curate, manage,
I see.
and support.
So what does it look like, right, if it's unbalanced?
So, for example, you may have cases, let's say if you don't have enough of the people over here, you will find that your economy will be subject to a high degree of cyclical shocks, right? And then your employment would not be able to handle. You have people with full employment or overemployment, and then suddenly you don't have employment.
I see.
And it goes into a situation like that. And SMEs, typically we stay, and in bad times, we are less likely to let go of people because it's one big family, right? So we all come together.
Very sentimental.
Yes, right?
Also, nowhere to uproot to.
Yeah, correct.
And we are all family because we know the staff.
Yeah.
We sometimes treat our staff a bit like family member. We scold them, right? Because we're close, right?
Coach
So
them,
sometimes it's a bit like that. But importantly is that very often we treat them like part of the family and we try to pull together. Whereas in the MNC, actually decision making is a lot more numbers driven and a lot more objective.
Correct.
So you don't make, I need to cut 10% means 10%.
Sometimes it's even made in a regional office that's not located here, right?
Yes.
So all the less sentimental they will be about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
just do it, 10% out.
Yes.
That's all.
I see, I see. I mean, that's why the work at ASME is so important. So maybe you could share from your perspective, right? I mean, having been volunteering in ASME for the longest time and currently the second year of electoral president, right? What is so important about the work that you're doing in ASME?
I think it's important for a few reasons. If you look at the space of the economy and around our local ecosystem, there are different organizations that reflect and feedback and look and help different segments. And very often, naturally, you look into sectorial models like, construction and logistics and so on.
Yeah.
But you would realize once you look at 100 million downwards, right, and beyond, every sector has a very large difference from one end of the spectrum to the other end.
Yes.
I could be a two-man delivery shop and I'm in the logistics sector, or I could be a 200-man shop or 2,000, right?
Yeah.
So when you deal with sectorial issues, the advantage is that you can be focused around certain sectors. The challenge is that you can't see sometimes because when you have very large firms, their problems are very different from smaller ones.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can't see the smaller challenges, right? So the role of ASME here is really to help the smaller boys deal with and speak up and also transmit both direction, right? Messages and information to the policyholders and the businesses in the sector, and ensure that there is a good alignment of policies and implementation execution. So that's one facet.
I see. But if I'm a retail shop owner, I own a mama shop, for example, I probably one man, another part-timer, right? Why would I think that my voice is important at the policy level? Are there some examples of that being applicable?
I think the reality for many of the small little shops, right, they will find that I just one person, 2%, my voice is not going to be heard. I think the important thing is to still hear what's going on because they represent a segment.
Yes.
You add them together, they can be quite a large segment, if not in turnover, but in actual numbers of people, right?
Yeah.
So I think if a policy made is not, and it's too sudden, it's not favorable, you may have a situation where this segment is wiped out or this segment suffers, right?
Wow.
So that is where it's important that they speak up or they share. And sometimes policy takes a while to change or adjust.
Correct.
But very often the feedback goes up, and if you are persistent and you are able to be objectively sharing the situation, very often I find that it does have its outcome from the policy perspective.
I see. So ASME then becomes the voice that represents the minority of SMEs. and not minority because they are small in numbers. Actually, they are quite large in numbers, right, as compared to multinationals, but minority in terms of how they are more segmented, right, in their own industry, in their own sectors.
Yes.
And Asme represents them all coming together, right, to inform policymakers, right, on what is a better on-the-ground approach.
Yes, and what's the challenge, right? And that allows for a degree of vibrancy in the whole economy and a good mix.
Okay, so what in your opinion right now, right, is the landscape like in terms of the overall direction of how Singapore is supporting SMEs in general?
So, so I've been in Asme since 2009. It's 16 years, 15 years ago. And from 2011, I took on the role of vice president in various capacity because we have four vice presidents, so we have different roles.
Yeah.
And I think I started looking at budget from 2012 onwards. Well, I started to be involved in giving budget feedback even as early as 2010
Right.
in media and so on. But of course, not really looking at the budget itself. Because in the Singapore budget process, right, the government announces the budget sometime around Chinese New Year.
Oh, yeah.
So the government financial year end is 31st of March, right? So whether you're going to
Hot
celebrate
news.
CNY with the finance minister or not.
Yeah.
And before the budget is announced, there's always a feedback session that happens tail end of the previous year.
Okay.
So they take feedback, they take recommendations from various bodies. And if you watch the news, actually nowadays, PM Wong, right, they are asking for anyone to come and give feedback, citizens and so on. It's quite a lot of feedback, right? But I think it's good if you can handle that. So anyway, these feedback come in. So our association actually looks at the situation and give our feedback as well. So I personally have been doing that for a while. And over the last 14 years of looking at budget, and therefore if you're looking at budget, you look at economy.
Correct.
So I'm a lot more attuned and I watch it a lot more because then I got to be able to answer, right? So it's
say the
a
wrong
very good
things.
training, by the way, to be called upon by the media to give comments on certain issues.
Yeah.
A lot of training because you then got to read up. Then sometimes the news calls you about things that you don't even know
Right.
about. Then you got to
That
quickly
just
catch up.
happened and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. So the landscape is this. I think the government recommendation or policy in the past around SME is that build your base at home. Make sure that you are stable, your business is strong, you have a good brand locally, and your business is robust before going abroad.
Okay.
So if you look at the earlier days, it's always about, usually the support for going abroad are centered around the larger enterprises because then you can bring your brand abroad. That's always been the thinking. I think the trade wars or the trade tensions in the last actually it's more than that, almost 8 years because Trump started, right? That's 8 years ago. So since 8 years ago, it has really reconfigured a lot of trade structures and business structures.
Oh, okay. How so?
Reconfigured. Yeah, how so?
Yeah. So prior to this, right, there was a steady evolution of things. China, over the years, from Deng Xiaoping opening up, became stronger and stronger, building up their manufacturing base. US continued to invent things, and then Europe, everyone had a place, right? And there was an evolution, and then things will evolve.
And it's cyclical predictably as well, right?
Yes. And it doesn't change overnight, right? It changes over decades.
Yes.
So when Trump came in and started to take very drastic trade actions, and mostly against China, but other places also got, right? I think
Impacted. Yeah.
Mexico or some other countries which she thinks are dumping and so on.
Yeah.
That resulted in China becoming really feeling like being hemmed in, right?
Yes.
And China is always the manufacturing country of the world. They're they're factory of the world, right?
Yes. Everywhere.
So now you're
everything.
telling China through the last 8 years that I don't want your goods. correct?
That's the US telling China, but I
Yes.
still want China goods.
Yes, yes,
I still love China goods.
yes. But because US says that, China then has to respond, right? Because US is a very big trade partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the last 8 years, the Chinese companies have become very hyper innovative
Right.
because they had to evolve themselves.
Correct.
And within China, it's also very competitive.
Yes.
So they
Yeah.
compete against one another. So it becomes supercharged, right?
Yeah,
The
extremely
winners
so.
are like, the superman of all the
billionaires of the
business.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their business models, the way they execute, the way they operate are all highly evolved.
Yes.
And you are telling China that you can't, I don't want your goods anymore. So if you're sitting there, firstly, okay, I better be even more competitive. I better be even more innovative because I can't rely on Western technology. So I got to
I
evolve
see.
myself, right? That's part
Yes.
one. Second is that I don't want your goods anymore. I want to buy from Vietnam. I want to buy from other countries. So naturally, I would say then I have no choice. I've got to then set up base in other countries. I got to be beyond just a Chinese company.
So that forced them to also think about globalization.
Yes.
I see.
So what in the last 8 years you essentially are seeing is all these highly evolved companies with very advanced technology coming out. And because it happened over a very short period of time, they're doing it very quickly.
8 years. 8 years means 2015
When
period.
Trump came on, right?
Yeah.
But the early few years is just, wow, is it really happening and so on. Then Biden came in and doubled down on this policy. So I think that the Biden administration was really when the Chinese companies, like the reality check, that it isn't going away. It isn't just a Trump thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is going to be here. So that's when they doubled down on their internationalization, regionalization efforts.
I see.
So now you have all the Chinese companies coming out.
Yeah.
That's one trade reconfiguration, right? And Singapore as a home base, therefore you're seeing the fact that Chinese companies are coming here.
That's true. There's a huge flood, literally, when we go out on the streets, even to see F&B stores that
Yes.
are like Chinese and all
a
that.
lot of Chinese franchise brands are coming
Yeah.
on board also.
Yes. And to a lesser extent, you have Japan, Taiwan, Korea doing the same.
Yeah.
Right, you see
Yes.
a lot of Korean restaurants, right? Also,
Yes,
right? So many Korean
yes.
restaurants, and they're really served by Koreans,
Yeah.
Correct.
And then Japanese as well, because the economy in Japan isn't doing so good, so they're trying to come out.
Yeah.
But why Singapore? Because we are East and West, right?
Yeah.
And we are well known to be transparent, open, efficient, safe. So there are a lot of advantages landing here. Not that our market is big, but then you must land here first, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we are a good landing point, you
Yeah.
know, especially before our cost started to become so high. We're good landing point. So what does that mean for SMEs when you have all these companies landing here? It means that competition now becomes very intense.
Globalized. Now you're
So we are
competing on-
dealing with a lot of companies trying to come here and
Yeah.
competing with us. So I don't think that we can anymore look at our home market as a base for us to build our strength.
It's no longer a local environment.
Yeah, we are an international environment stuck in a very small, well
Area.
not too small, but an economy, $300 over billion economy, right? So that's what it is. We have a lot of competition here.
I see.
And our local, and it has happened over a very short period of time scale,
yeah.
relatively speaking.
Yeah.
4 years,
4
more or
years,
less.
wow.
Because I feel that the first 4 of the 8 years, everyone is still like trying to adapt, right?
Yeah.
But then the second 4 years, the final recent 4 years has been really a lot of movements.
Yeah.
There's still a lot
Acceleration.
coming, right?
Yeah.
Or more Chinese stores, and you see a lot of interest from Japanese companies, Taiwanese as well.
Yeah.
Because also of the cross-strait tension that's ramped up even more in the last 4 years.
I see.
During Trump era, the first 4 years, there wasn't so much cross-strait tension. That only happened in the recent Biden administration, where the cross-strait tension really shot up. So then Taiwanese companies also
So the
want
question is, how does the cross-trade tension, right, affect local business?
So it doesn't directly affect us unless you have real business over there. But Chinese and Taiwanese companies are also landing here
So
to look at
more
diversification.
than just China, there's
Yes.
Taiwanese
so they are the
joining in as well.
accelerant of global companies coming to land
Yes.
here for. Okay.
On the positive side, you then see a lot of family offices setting up here.
Yeah.
So it is a natural evolution. Well, it's a natural result of all this.
Yes.
Money flow comes in.
Yeah.
But the impact to SMEs is that we are seeing that costs go up. And
Harder to do good business.
yes.
Yeah.
And in the last few months, well, actually this year, economy hasn't been good,
Yes.
especially in certain sectors, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And the restaurant, anyone who runs a restaurant or F&B will tell you, footfall isn't that great, people are really not spending.
Yes.
But rentals are not coming down.
They're going up.
Yes, or at least holding.
Correct.
Yes.
And manpower is also not
Not going down
easier,
at all.
right?
Yeah. No.
Why? Because you have a lot of foreign demand coming in to set up
Yeah.
see.
new stores.
So the supply of labor and workforce is actually, in other words, the demand is actually going up. It's not the other way around.
Yes. So the demand for rental spaces and manpower has gone either notching up or at least holding steady.
Yeah.
But if you peer beneath, right, likely is that the local companies are coming down, but foreign coming up,
Going up.
averaging up to
Wow.
be a slight gradual increase.
I see.
Yeah.
That
And-
explains why some of the companies keep saying, oh, but yes, COVID is over, right? Everyone's coming out to spend, but where are they spending on?
Yes.
Why is it that the economy feels bad?
Well,
Yes.
yeah. In actual fact, I have a client who literally says this. So I think it's very reflective of what you shared because they have been established in their industry for a long time. So they're almost a decade in. But she said that in the last 3 to 4 years, they have seen a sudden influx of Chinese companies in their industry. Right. And it's so much so that in the last year or so, she literally said this to me, which is like, I have to rethink whether, firstly, this industry is feasible even for me,
Wow.
and or whether this business model is making sense. Because while they were very established and they were doing well, the sudden last 4 years has literally like hit them like a truck and they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's almost like in parallel to what you say in terms of timeline. I
Yes.
think.
So if you slow down and maybe look across different industries, you'll start seeing that very likely you'll find this trend.
I see.
So
Yeah.
you can't rely on your home ground now,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Secondly, there are foreign companies coming in competing. So then what is it for us as SMEs? So that's been what I spent a bit of time thinking about, like, especially when I took on the presidency, took on the first budget this year, and then speaking to various office holders as well as senior government officials, and then observing the trends even more. Because as a president, everything is now on me, right? I don't have a president to then defer to or consult.
Okay.
So I had to do even more research. So that's my observation.
I see.
Yes.
So how should a local business owner think then? I mean, it sounds very scary because now I thought that my home ground, my people support my business, but suddenly I'm being plunged into this unknown world of international companies left, right, center, right? So how as a local business do I have to, how do I react?
Yeah. So I think from Asme's perspective, I think one of the important thing that we got to look at is how to roll with the punches, right? And in business, that's really what we got to think about.
Correct.
The natural human instinct is to kind of stop change or ignore change.
Yes.
Or feel comfortable.
Yeah, try to find somewhere where
dive
you can
in
be comfortable.
deeper, actually.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at where the change direction is headed and think about how can you then roll with the punch, I think that would be the most appropriate response if you want to have your business continue to take the advantage of opportunities and go with the trends, right? Therefore, I think that we first, the tagline is to look at being global as a business.
Okay.
So I think, if you look at business, do it at home. I don't think it works anymore. And you got to think about your business from being a global business, at least regional, from day one. Think about it that way.
I see.
Right. Second, then underneath that, right, there are a few facets. Internationalization is one. Doesn't mean that you go all the way to Mexico or something, right? But at least think about Malaysia, Philippines.
Bigger market, basically.
Yes, in the region, right?
Yeah.
That's the first part. But internationalization doesn't just mean you go abroad. There are a lot of inbound SMEs from other countries, right?
Yes.
How do we partner with them?
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So Asme wants to create that. We are trying to link up and create bridges so that we can facilitate this and make this happen. Have people talk, meet each other. That's a better chance to then do more together.
But I guess as a local business owner, sometimes I would think I fear the giants, Like if I imagine a franchise Chinese brand coming to Singapore and then they want to find a local partner, what is it in me that they want to partner with me?
Yeah.
Right? Why not just hire a local person and set it up, do some business development work here, and they set up their landing point and then they go Southeast Asia region? Why me?
And chances are that would be likely some of the Chinese giants that come in. That's how they think.
Yes.
And of course, they're so evolved and they're quite advanced, right? So naturally.
Yes.
But the other part that we as SMEs are got to do better, which is part of what we promote and want to help with, is that you need to understand your own value. Now, I think SMEs in Singapore are very strong at marketing, or at least better than many other in our region, right?
Yeah.
But marketing isn't the same as knowing your enterprise value and working on your enterprise value.
So what I know by marketing is creative ways to market my product, services, think about ways to connect with my audiences. So that's what you mean by marketing, right?
Yes.
But what is it about enterprise value that's different?
Yes. So enterprise value, for example, can be a IP that you have, a patent that you've got,
Okay.
right? It could be a trademark that you have.
Right.
So
Now-
you mean like holding brand IPs?
Yes.
For example, I create an event, the event is this name.
Yes.
This is my brand IP.
Yes.
I
So
see.
tangible IP would be an example, right? And I think some companies have been looking at that. But not all companies can create tangible IP. Some have. Now, a lot of our SMEs are in the service business, right?
Yes.
And you have processes, you have a lot of intangible things in
Yes.
your organization, right? Other than just performing the work and earning that manpower fee or hourly fee that you charge and service fee.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intangibles. How do you then take that intangible value that you've got and articulate that, enshrine it, and make it as part of your value proposition?
What was an example of that intangible value?
So, for
proposition?
example, as a business, sometimes, let's say, the ability of a business to execute a certain set of work may rest on its very strong project management skill, and there may be certain process that they have that makes it unique, right?
Yeah.
Being able to articulate that, being able to enshrine that, and being able to look at how that can be perpetuated can become a value, right,
I
within
see.
an organization.
So certain SOPs or something that you have created that is localized,
Yes.
that is working for Singapore in
Yes.
that sense.
But it's not just like that, but it also comes with other facets, right? Articulating it, being able to write it out, being able to train other people, being able to scale it.
Yeah.
All of that becomes that enterprise value that you can build.
I see. So
Yeah.
it's almost like process-based IPs, if you're saying that.
Call it the intangible value. So if you look at the big four, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
EY, Deloitte, PwC, they don't have that much IP patents, but they have a lot of value from their process, how they go about doing things, how they have designed their processes, and also the knowledge that they possess. And all of that is that whole bunch of intangible value that they have that gives that that enterprise value in these organizations. Then there are other facets like knowing your finance, knowing how to read your finance, knowing how to get the numbers done. Like, for example, there are a lot of SMEs that don't really do a very robust set of books.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
may not pay themselves very well because they say, hey, if I pay more, then I got to pay income tax. So then I do maybe dividend instead, right?
Yeah.
There are many ways to engineer or to structure your finance.
Yes.
But certain ways, when you structure it, it'll help you build your enterprise value with certain ideas in mind. Certain ways will give you short-term returns. I don't pay
Right.
tax, I have more cash to spend at the end of the year. But all of that may have impact to you in the longer term if you are trying to structure an M&A deal
Yeah.
or a joint venture.
I see.
Right.
So it's very intangible. Well, it is quite complicated and it's quite layered.
Yeah.
And most SMEs would either say, I don't have time, I don't look at it, or the other facet is that I think that this market is underserved because people who have the know-how typically only focus at those pre-IPO companies.
Oh, so
Because-
that's where the big money is, I guess.
Yeah.
They can charge a fee.
Yeah.
So then you IPO already, they take a fee, right? So the demand and supply goes over to there.
Yes.
If you're $500,000 in turnover, okay,
Yeah.
likely you can't really pay me for all these things, and likely I'd rather spend my time serving those that gives me that revenue. Logical.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's underserved, and I think Asme it wants to then focus on this area to level up the people in the broad area of how do you deal with enterprise value and raising that and working on it.
Yeah, it sounds like two folds to it, because the first part of it is really from the SME's point of view. Because a lot of, I think, companies or business owners or entrepreneurs, when they set up the business, the end intent is actually not so clear. Like if there is an intent on globalization or internationalization in this case.
Or even structuring the right way to
the structure,
go somewhere, right?
Yeah, so that then the structure makes sense.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues right now is literally companies are already kind of stuck in the way
Yes.
that they are now.
Yes.
And then how do they shift?
Yeah. So we say, hey, we are very fortunate to be born in Singapore because we were very safe, everything, right?
Yeah.
But one of the big difference about being born here is that the way we see the world, right? We are little red dot, right? End to end, 40 over kilometers, or the other side, maybe 30 or 20, right? Depending we are reclaiming land, so sometimes we don't have the latest numbers. But that's our world. I was in China. I had a company in China, started in 2009. And I had staff for a long time, interacted with them. And one of the things that struck me is that by nature of where you live, where you were born, that gives you your perspective in life. And when I first landed in China, I visited in Qingdao. I visited a company that did similar work as me, which is in software, web development, web design.
Yeah.
And this company was set up in seven cities already. And I found that they were already from day one designed to set up in 7 countries.
I see.
So they already set up in 7 countries by design.
Right.
So the way they structured the fulfillment process, the customer service, all of that was designed for 7 countries structure.
Wow.
Right.
What's the difference between a design meant for my local market versus a design meant for 7 countries?
A company designed for one location would have a literal scaling problem, right? Because then when I go to a different country, I then have to figure out how does my finance work? How do I do fulfillment? How do I do my sales, right? But if you do it from day one, you would know that I do two-person sales team. That's my cost of sales. And then I centralize my finance and I need a system to control all of this.
So it's a bit like central kitchen with like F&B outlets.
Design from day one,
yeah.
right?
I
Rather
see.
than
That makes
a
sense.
zi man doing
Yeah.
that, hey, I need to do
One
then
chef.
you got to rebuild your processes.
I see.
Not impossible.
Yeah.
But sometimes we get so comfortable doing this one man char kway teow, right? That we don't think or go out of it. And it's painful to restructure. And I want to share one more thing is that I had my staff that came to me because I hired people and we chit chat. And the way they think, I say, 老板, I think well, I'll use English lah, right? We're speaking to me in Mandarin. I'm thinking, one day I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to start a business, and then I think I'll do it in maybe the 3 main cities and then maybe 2 sub-cities. Because they're born there and they look at the world as so many, they look at the MRT line, they know how many countries, right? How many locations. Yeah. So they think about revenues and business setup and cost, right? Day one from a multi-location, multi-city point of view.
I see.
So we don't think of it like that. We don't, right? So that's fundamentally the difference lah.
I see. So it's going to be painful because if I'm a one-man char kway teow, which I believe majority of Singaporean SMEs are, now I have to make a stand and say, you know what, the world is like that. It's difficult. Economy is going down. No matter how much I struggle right now for the next 5 years, it's going to be a downtrend. So I have to make a stand as an SME owner to say, hey, now is the time I want to pivot or I want to go global. And it's an entire restructuring as a whole for the business.
I think that, if you sit there and then you look at how it's like, it's really very scary. And sometimes you are just, I don't know, wake up, right? You just want to doom scroll and forget about all these things and set your mind away from the worries. Yeah. But I think if you take action bit by bit, every day, it really would be a very different business that you've got by 6 months' time. And start by just maybe looking at where your costs can come down.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of us already started offshoring.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's true.
That's an example, right? Offshoring.
Well, actually, I think also that there is real optimization that can come out of the internationalization, right? Because if you have all your eggs in one basket, like we are stuck here, right? The risk-wise, you are centralized here only, right? If there are different points, then I think there would be a positive effect to that in terms of management.
Risk management.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good perspective because recently I spoke to a friend who knows this company that's in many countries around the world, right? And this year in May, they did a mass retrenchment. So in the news, it sounds very bad for the economy as well. Oh, mass retrenchment, major layoffs, so on and so forth. But then when this friend of mine, go back and connect with that person, he said, actually, within the next 3 months, I hired the same number of people in another country. So it's not really so much of a mass retrenchment, but it's a reallocation of resources. Right, and because of the ability to make that moves, they are probably able to withstand more attacks or economy downturns, fluctuations.
Yeah. Literally, you are not localized. Therefore, with a larger footprint, you are more robustly defended against shocks that may be localized.
Yeah.
If it's a regional shock, then you'll be affected, but localized shock, then you have an ability to then move around, move your resources around.
But what do you think, what's your vision of Singapore's future in terms of the businesses going to be like, right? Because ideally, all of us think global. We are able to expand regionally and we're able to create multinational brands, right? That's the ideal scenario. But how about the local flavor? Will that be actually lost? Will we become like Las Vegas where everywhere you go, it's the...
Same.
Yeah, same.
I think the Singapore brand has its unique value. We, for one, I think not so positively, we are seen as being generally naive and very honest and trustworthy.
Trustworthy, yeah.
Right? But that is also the value of the brand. And I think if you can look at your value and not just keep looking at profit, not that you don't, you have to, but importantly is really building your value at all times, right? So we have a certain brand value that's been built up over the years by our government through many decades, right? As businesses, I think there's a lot of value in perpetuating that brand and manifesting it, right? Now, one of the things about SMEs is that us going overseas alone, while there will be advantages, often we may not be able to tackle things that require more resources. For example, if I ask you to pitch for a $20 million project, Likely, you don't have the manpower resources, financial
Correct.
resources to go and pitch for it, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, if a company wants to award to an entity, I would award to a larger entity than a smaller one if
With
my
more
project is like
credentials, even.
correct. Second thing is that the certain initiatives require longer term investment. A lot of times we don't go abroad to open markets as Singapore companies. It's because Singapore has too good a margin. 1 hour of my personal time, I earn $50 Sing dollars versus 50 ringgit.
Right.
3 times, right? Then I'd rather spend 1 hour in Singapore than 1 hour in JB. So
Correct.
that becomes a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And that stops me from opening up a new market.
So is that an issue with appetite and ambition?
I think it's got to do with your resource availability.
I
Because
see.
you only have so much time, right?
Of course.
So here is where I think Asme can also play a role, active role, which is that by pulling SMEs together, by fit lah, right?
Yeah.
Then likely we can go and pitch for larger projects collectively under the Singapore flag.
Right.
Right.
And we may be able to invest in opening up a market collectively because hiring one person for 10 companies versus each one hiring one on your own is very different, right? You
For
can
sure.
collectively do it. So I think the association has that opportunity to evolve itself into a more active association in this way.
I see. So it's almost like shared resources coming together.
Yes.
Since we are tackling the bigger boys anyway, why not let's bring our arms together,
Yes.
share something together, represent certain aspects of our business
Yes.
and what we're great at, and tackle a bigger project altogether.
Yes.
I see.
What we have to be wary and aware, mindful of that would pull us against that, right? As a natural current, like gravity, is that Singaporeans are not good at collaborating with one another.
Why so late?
We from primary school, we are very good
Competitive.
students, right?
Yes, we are
So
competitive.
naturally, we are top students in our world. We are top students in the world, right? We have the best scores. Recently, I read we are topping all the IB scores internationally.
Wow.
So we are very good at competing with our peers in a class.
I see.
So naturally, that mindset and thinking lends itself to be when I see another SME, a Singaporean, I want to compete against him. That then means that sometimes you lose sight of what the real goal is.
I see. It's a mindset gap now, I would say.
Yeah, and it's also the lack of habit and lack of training.
And perspective as well.
Yes.
Because today, if I'm an SME owner and I realize that actually the world is your oyster, which technically is, but I don't have the perspective that other countries are actually coming to my country to eat my pie, and therefore it's time to have that further goal, right? Then I wouldn't take that stand as well.
It's not
Yeah.
a natural progression, I guess.
it's
The
not.
thing is, it's
Yes.
and we are in a time, I think, where we are forced to have to think of it that way.
Yeah.
I think.
So
Correct.
we really gotta keep reminding ourselves that the world is very big and we're very small. Coming together, holding each other's hand is a much better approach than trying to fight for that small bowl of rice.
Literally.
That 5 people fighting over a small bowl of rice, right?
Correct.
So I think that's important that we have to keep at the back of our mind all the time. Come together, hold each other's hand, collaborate, and figure out how we can win together.
I see. Is that something that is visionary, or are there cases in Singapore that has already happened?
I think that there are successful cases of people coming together. If you just ask around, there are, and there are a lot more of unsuccessful ones. And especially a lot of attempts to bring companies together
Yeah.
have been premised around a queen bee, like a bigger boy, because naturally the idea is like, okay, you have got a big boy, and then the big boy would then be able to win more projects, and then
Yeah.
you bring a group of people together. What I've heard, I've never personally participated in one,
Yeah.
but what I understand is that very often the big boy gets into a conflicted situation where unless he has no expertise, right?
Yeah.
If not, then why do I eat that whole $20 million project? Why do I want to give 5 million out to 5 other companies when my overhead of managing them is so much more? I might as well bring it in-house. So many collaborations sometimes don't work out, which is why I think if Asme drives it as a trade association, we actually have the advantage in the sense that we would be vested to ensure fairness and equality in that sense.
It's the right structure as well, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
see. Okay, sounds good.
All right, excellent.
Oh, that was a great conversation.
Yeah.